When someone mentions that life is fleeting, our instinct usually kicks into overdrive. We start crafting mental lists of adventures to pursue, skills to master, and achievements to unlock before time runs out. It's as if hearing life is short triggers an internal alarm clock that screams, move faster, do more, be everywhere at once. But what if we've been interpreting this wake-up call completely backwards? What if the brevity of our existence isn't a reason to accelerate through every opportunity that crosses our path, but rather a compelling argument to pump the brakes and choose our direction more carefully? Think about it for a moment. If you only had one precious vacation day left, would you spend it racing frantically through 12 tourist attractions, snapping blurry photos while checking items off a list? Or would you choose one meaningful experience and truly savor it? Most of us, at various points in our journey, have fantasized about living what we might call an extraordinary life. Picture it: a calendar bursting with social commitments, professional opportunities knocking down your door, an endless stream of places to explore and people to meet. Your phone buzzes constantly with invitations. Your social media showcases a dizzying array of experiences, and everyone seems to want a piece of your time. This vision often takes root early. Perhaps it grew from childhood experiences where our worth felt tied to gold stars on homework assignments or trophies on shelves. Maybe it emerged from cultural messages that equate busyness with importance or productivity with purpose. Or it could simply be wired into our individual nature, that restless drive to expand, achieve, and accumulate. None of these impulses are inherently destructive. The desire to grow, experience, and contribute can fuel remarkable accomplishments and rich relationships. But here's the crucial distinction: there's a vast difference between consciously choosing an active lifestyle and unconsciously defaulting to one because we haven't examined what we actually want. The danger lies not in the choices themselves, but in making them without awareness, in living someone else's definition of success, without ever asking if it aligns with our own values and temperament. Henry David Thoreau, that master of intentional living, captured this perfectly when he observed how even the wisest among us can get caught up in countless trivial affairs throughout the day. He suggested we approach life like a mathematician approaching a complex equation: strip away all the unnecessary complications first, then work with what remains. But how do we identify what's truly necessary versus what's simply noise? The Roman philosopher Seneca offered a perspective that might surprise you. He argued that our problem isn't actually having too little time. It's that we're incredibly wasteful with the time we have. According to him, life provides us with a generous allocation of hours, days, and years. The issue is that we squander so much of it on activities that neither fulfill us nor move us toward our genuine goals. When we spend our days in what Seneca called heedless luxury, perhaps scrolling mindlessly through social media, attending events we don't enjoy, or pursuing achievements that don't align with our values, we create an artificial sense of time scarcity. We feel rushed and overwhelmed, not because time is genuinely short, but because we're using it inefficiently. This insight points toward a radical reframe. Instead of trying to cram more activities into our schedule, what if we focused on making each activity more intentional and meaningful? The ancient Stoic philosophers developed a framework that can help us think about this differently. They argued that most of our anxiety and dissatisfaction comes from depending too heavily on things outside our control: other people's opinions, material possessions, external recognition, or circumstances we can't influence. Instead, they suggested focusing our energy on what we can actually control: our thoughts, our responses, our choices, and our character. This doesn't mean becoming passive or unambitious. Rather, it means directing our ambition toward areas where our effort can actually make a difference. Marcus Aurelius, who happened to be both a philosopher and a Roman emperor, wrote extensively about this balance. Despite having tremendous external power, he recognized that genuine satisfaction came from fulfilling his responsibilities well, developing wisdom and self-discipline, and using any remaining time for reflection and growth. Now, you don't need to adopt the exact lifestyle of a second-century Roman leader to benefit from this perspective, but the underlying principle remains valuable. Before adding more to your life, it's worth examining what's already there and whether it truly serves your deeper goals. The 17th century philosopher René Descartes offered a helpful thought experiment that we can apply to this challenge. Imagine you have a basket full of apples, but you're concerned that some might be rotten. If you leave them mixed together, the decay will spread to the fresh fruit. The only solution is to empty the entire basket, inspect each apple individually, and only return the ones that are still good. Descartes used this analogy to describe his process of examining beliefs, but it works equally well for examining how we spend our time. How often do we actually empty our metaphorical basket and inspect each commitment, activity, or habit? How many aspects of our current lifestyle are rotten, draining our energy without providing genuine value? And how much might this decay be affecting other areas of our life? This inspection process might reveal something surprising. Many of the activities we think we have to do are actually choices we're making unconsciously. That committee you serve on out of obligation, the social media platforms you check compulsively, the weekend plans you make to avoid seeming antisocial. These might all be apples worth leaving out of the basket. But here's where things get interesting, and perhaps counterintuitive. One of the biggest obstacles to living more intentionally isn't external pressure or lack of time, it's our relationship with boredom. Most of us have developed sophisticated strategies for avoiding even the slightest hint of boredom. We fill every moment of our schedule, every quiet pause in conversation, every idle minute, while waiting in line. Our phones have become portable boredom prevention devices, offering infinite streams of stimulation whenever our minds might otherwise wander. This constant stimulation seems productive, but it often prevents us from doing the deeper work that would actually move us forward. When we're always consuming content, always responding to messages, always attending events, we rarely create space for the slower, more substantial activities that require sustained attention. Writing that novel, developing that business idea, having that meaningful conversation with a loved one, simply sitting quietly with our own thoughts. These activities can't compete with the immediate gratification of digital entertainment or social stimulation. But they only seem boring in comparison to constant stimulation. Remove the comparison, and suddenly they become the most interesting options available. Think about it this way: if you had a completely empty Friday evening with no phone, no television, no video games, and no plans, what would you naturally gravitate toward? Probably something you've been putting off, but actually care about. Maybe you'd write in a journal, call someone you miss, work on a creative project, or simply spend time observing your own thoughts. These activities only seem less appealing than scrolling through social media when both options are available. But limit your choices to meaningful activities, and you might discover that what you thought was boredom was actually the beginning of focus. This principle connects to an idea from Taoist philosophy called Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing or effortless action. In traditional contexts, this refers to performing tasks with complete focus and natural flow, without forcing or overthinking the process. But we can apply this same principle to choosing which tasks to take on in the first place. Instead of forcing ourselves to say yes to every opportunity out of fear that we'll miss something important, what if we only said yes to things that felt naturally aligned with our values and goals? This doesn't mean being passive or lazy. It means being selective enough that when we do engage with something, we can bring our full attention and energy to it. As Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching, the supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. Water doesn't struggle to flow downhill. It naturally follows the path of least resistance while still reaching its destination. Similarly, we might find that living with less force and more intentionality allows us to accomplish more meaningful goals with less stress and greater satisfaction. Of course, this approach requires us to get comfortable with disappointing some people and missing some opportunities. If we're only saying yes to things that feel genuinely aligned with our priorities, we'll inevitably say no to some things that others expect us to do. But consider the alternative: saying yes to everything important to everyone else leaves little time or energy for what's important to you. You end up living everyone's priority except your own. This doesn't mean we should ignore our responsibilities or become completely selfish. We all have obligations to our families, communities, and work. But within those constraints, there's usually more room for choice than we realize. The question is whether we're making those choices consciously or just letting them happen by default. For some people, the ideal life really does involve rapid water, constant movement, high energy, multiple projects running simultaneously. If that genuinely energizes you and aligns with your values, then that's your right path. The goal isn't to convince everyone to live the same way, but rather to help each person discover what actually works for them. But for many others, a steadier current might be more sustainable and satisfying. A pace that allows for both focused effort and peaceful reflection. A schedule with enough space to be fully present for the activities and relationships that matter most. A lifestyle that prioritizes depth over breadth, quality over quantity. In our current cultural moment, with its emphasis on optimization and achievement, simply being a decent, reliable, thoughtful person might actually be a radical act. Showing up consistently for a small circle of people you care about, doing work that contributes something valuable to the world, even if it doesn't make you famous, maintaining your mental health, and treating others with kindness. These might not generate viral social media posts or impressive dinner party stories, but they form the foundation of a life well lived. And paradoxically, people who focus on these fundamentals often end up having more impact than those who chase external recognition. Some of the most successful people you'll never hear about are living quietly in communities around the world, teaching students, caring for patients, building businesses that serve real needs, raising children who will grow up to contribute positively to society. Their success isn't measured in headlines or bank balances, but in the steady accumulation of meaning and positive impact over time. This perspective suggests a different way of thinking about achievement entirely. Instead of asking, "How can I do more?" or "How can I get noticed?" we might ask, "What kind of person do I want to become? And what kind of impact do I want to have on the people around me?" These questions naturally lead toward choices that emphasize character over recognition, relationships over achievements, and sustainable growth over rapid expansion. They create space for the kind of deep work and genuine connection that actually moves us toward our most important goals. The irony is that this more intentional, less frantic approach often ends up being more productive in the long run. When we're not constantly switching between tasks or activities, we can develop expertise and create work of higher quality. When we're not exhausted from overcommitment, we have more energy to bring to the things we do choose to pursue. When we're not stressed about missing out on everything, we can be more present for what we're actually experiencing. But perhaps most importantly, this approach allows us to develop a clearer sense of who we are and what we value. In the quiet spaces between activities, in the moments when we're not consuming content or responding to messages, we can actually hear our own thoughts. We can notice what energizes us and what drains us, what feels meaningful and what feels empty. This self-knowledge becomes the foundation for making better choices going forward. Instead of just reacting to whatever opportunities or pressures come our way, we can respond from a place of clarity about our own priorities and values. Of course, developing this clarity and living according to it isn't always simple. There are real pressures, financial, social, professional, that can make it difficult to choose the slower path. There are times when we genuinely need to push ourselves beyond our comfort zone or take on more than feels sustainable in service of important goals. The key is making these choices consciously rather than unconsciously. When we do need to operate at a faster pace or take on additional commitments, we can do so strategically and temporarily, with a clear plan for returning to a more sustainable rhythm. But for most of us, the greater risk isn't that we'll become too selective or too focused. The greater risk is that we'll continue drifting through our days, weeks, and years without ever pausing to ask whether our current path is actually taking us where we want to go. Life is indeed short, but not in the way we usually think. It's not short because we don't have enough time to do everything. It's short because we often spend so much of it on things that don't actually matter to us. When we're more intentional about our choices, when we create space for boredom and reflection, when we focus on becoming the kind of person we want to be rather than trying to impress others, those shorter days start to feel much fuller and more meaningful. The goal isn't to eliminate all activity or ambition from our lives, but rather to ensure that our activity and ambition are directed toward what truly matters to us. Sometimes that might mean saying yes to exciting opportunities and challenging projects. Other times it might mean saying no to good things in order to say yes to great things. But most importantly, It means regularly emptying that basket of apples, inspecting what we're carrying with us, and consciously choosing what deserves space in our one precious life.